All right. Well, welcome to our Loving Utah webinar today. And today we're going to be talking about the 6 domains of your church. This stuff comes out of the book Intentional Churches. So you can get a copy of that book free if you just go on lovingutah.org. And so we've been sharing about this on our webinars for about the last 5 weeks. And if you want to catch up on any of these topics, you can just watch these on the YouTube channel, and the links are on lovingutah.org as well. When I think about the church and I think about Jesus coming and establishing his church, and then really he turns his church over to, he's perfect, and he turns his church over to a bunch of imperfect people to lead his church, right? To lead it, to start churches, to plant churches, to go to new places, to tell people about the gospel. And it doesn't take very long. If you look in the book of Acts, it doesn't take very long before there's confusion and there's conflict and there's disagreements and all these things that happen. And then you start reading the epistles and here Paul and Peter and James, they're all trying to correct things that are going wrong in the church. And then you get to the book of Revelation, where Jesus comes to John, and John, who was at the cross, saw that, spend his whole life, being an apostle and a leader in the church. Here Jesus comes to him and he says, here's what the churches are doing great, and here's where they're really failing, right? Stuff is not working right. And so Jesus is in one sense encouraging the church and saying, this is what you do really well, and here's some things that you're not doing really well. And all that does is, for me, is it teaches me that our churches are never going to be perfect, right? We're always going to be human leaders that are flawed, right? And we're also going to be leading other humans that are flawed. And so what we're going to be talking about today in the 6 domains is really what things we need to be paying attention to in our churches, that really can actually help overcome some of these conflicts, overcome some of these other things, and keep our church focused on the Great Commission. So anyways, that I wanted to start just talking about that, and I'm going to share my screen here and just talk through oops, of course I started on the wrong one. Just talk through the 6 domains today. And in Intentional Churches, we talk about Church OS. So think about an operating system for your church. Think about, just like you have an operating system for your computer or your phone, it's what's happening in the background and what's working in the background to make what people see actually, what they see is actually working. So just 4 things about Church OS. It teaches every church leader how to utilize tools to activate their church's unique vision. So again, it's all about the tools, very practical, and these tools that we've been sharing for these last few weeks, and they're in the book, and they are what we use when we're coaching, is the tools unearth the strategies to accomplish the Great Commission. So we talk about the Great Commission, the uniqueness of your church, the uniqueness of your church's vision, but these tools kind of help you dig out and discover, like, what are we going to do? What practical steps are we going to do to get the vision moving forward? And it's predictable. So as you guys take these tools that are in the book, take these tools that we're talking about on these webinars, and you start using them with your team, these are tools that can be repeated year after year, and even used in your weekly staff meetings, elder meetings. You can use these on a regular basis, and starts getting you common language, which creates it to be sustainable. So again, anything that we would try to train in Intentional Churches is not us saying, here's a prescription for how to help your church grow. Here's a prescription to help your church move forward or make a greater kingdom impact. there's a lot of books that are helpful on that, and conferences that are helpful on here's specific things to do. But really, we think each church is unique, and so it makes it sustainable because each church leader has transferable common language and tools and processes that create a healthy culture. So repeating this over and over again actually helps your team, helps your elders, your leaders, your staff really make more and better disciples. And so that's the ultimate goal for this, is to really carry out the Great Commission. And then it really is measurable. So it produces measurable results by activating the Great Commission, refreshing your vision, and plans for double kingdom impact again and again. So we're always trying to think about what would double kingdom impact look like in our church. And if we could double our reach, and then we could do it again. But again, it takes these tools going back to these same conversations with our team. And the more you do it, the easier it gets with your team. You start making decisions faster by using these tools that help you with that. So when I talk about paying attention to the 6 domains of your church, there's this wheel kind of helps you see that. Your church is in the center, and these are the 6 things that we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to have our coaching team kind of share how these are working in their churches, giving you some examples of these things, and then some of the questions that you should be asking yourself and your team. We'll talk about those today. So the Great Commission engine, we've talked about that in previous weeks. We'll go over that real quick. Activation, that means taking what you're learning from the Great Commission engine, those things that are those aha moments that you're like, okay, we're learning about this, or this is something that's broken or it needs to be worked on or whatever. Then you activate that into doing what needs to happen to move forward. Your vision, when we talk about vision, we're talking about a 3 to 5 year vision. And when we say vision, it's what you feel as a team. What do you feel God's calling you to do? What do you feel God's calling you to do in your community, in your church? What do you want to see happen in the future? And so that's your 3 to 5 year vision, which we always say should always be refreshing that as well, right? When you have a vision and you put it on paper, oftentimes you can have things that interrupt that vision, right? So you got to refresh it, or things that are out of your control, like having a pandemic, which we're in right now as we're recording this, as that does interrupt different things. And actually Mike Packer is going to talk about that a little bit, about interruption, and then operations, all those things that have to make it work. That's the giving and the accounting and volunteers and staffing and all those things that you have to do to make the operation of your church work. And then leaders is important. So this is a great leadership development tool. Oftentimes we have leaders and staff members that have never been to Bible college. They've never led in a church before. Sometimes we're raising up leaders who have never really had a leadership position in life. And we have to raise up those leaders, and giving them this language and giving them tools to talk about actually creates boldness in them. It develops their leadership abilities. It gives them confidence. And so I've seen all this stuff really help churches develop the leaders around them. And then VIP action. And again, VIP stands for Vision Initiative Project. So your vision, how are you going to initiate action in that? So those are your action plans, and we talked about that last week. So I'm going to let Mike Packer. First of all, Mike, will you just share about the Great Commission engine and how that helped excite, when you started talking about that within your church, how did that excite your congregation, and how did it raise up people?
Yeah, we started the process a little while ago. I mean, we've been doing it now for, it seems like, a couple of years that we've been involved in this, and it just keeps getting sharper and sharper. And so this last time, right before Christmas, or right after Christmas, that weekend before, we gave the vision that we wanted to impact the people that were coming to the building. Because if you've been to Southeast, we have a great location, a great space, and we have a lot of people that come through here that aren't part of the church. And so really the heart of our VIP was to get people involved in, like, how do we reach the one, not only outside the building, but the people that are coming too. And so we gave the vision, and then there was a individual who came up to me after the service. She says, I need to talk with you. I know what we can do. And I said, all right, well, that's fine. And so lo and behold, she has started several preschools and after school programs, and that was nowhere on our radar. And so we are now in the process of starting a preschool. We'll see. Right now, that's kind of on pause right now just because of the pandemic. But that's really kind of what happened, is as we're casting the vision, as we cast more of the vision, more people come up and say, hey, I want to be a part of that. And that's what happened with this lady. With that, and it's not just that. There was her, and then we have some other people that are recognizing, like, our age group that we're aiming for is Danny and Megan. They have an LDS background, young kids. I mean, that's our target. And so for us, it's a lot, how do we reach their kids? And so we've done a lot of work that way. And so the questions that we really should be asking ourselves then with your team is, how can you intentionally connect the lost to your church, Christ, and one another? And that's been a big, a big hub of conversation with us, is how do we move the church outside of the comfort zone and go after the one? And then also, once they're there, how will you disciple them into a devoted and growing followers of Jesus? Because it's not just about serving them, it's about connecting them to the body. But then it's not just connecting them to the body, it's connecting them with Jesus. And how do we create programs, or how do we create environments where it lends itself to deeper discipleship? And then how will we put people on mission with Christ and our church? And that's really it. It's casting the vision and allowing people to hear it and to see it, and for them to say, you know what, I really want to be on board with that. I want to be on board with where they're going. So.
Okay, that's awesome. So as you, Mike, have cast the vision and said, we are praying, and I know you've been doing this for a couple of years. We're praying for young families. We're doing this, and we're and being in a congregation that's primarily 50 plus, praying for those young families to come in. And now I think the more you've been clear about your one and saying, this is the people who we're trying to reach, the more people have been excited at Southeast to say, we want to be a part of that. I want to use my gifts, my talents to be a part of that. So thanks. That was good. I'm going to have Ben just talk about activation. So when we were going through this process, the Church OS process and the intentional growth process with Lifestone, they were kind of at a spot where they have a small building, around 6,500 square feet, I think, and 5,000 square feet. Yeah. Is it really that small? Here I've been saying 6,000 the whole time. 5,000 square feet, running around, 250 people, lots of kids, so not a lot of space. So when we were going through this, you kind of had a long range thought, and then what happened then in our time together?
Yeah, so we have lots. That's been one of our big things, is space issues, and that is a beautiful part of this process, is getting people, getting other people a part of the process, and then making decisions that lead to action and empowering people to do that. And so it led us on a path to look at the bigger long-range vision that we had developed through all this, and figure out that really it was hard for us to go from very, very small cramped space to how do we get something significantly bigger that fits more of the vision that we're praying God would do? And it developed a Band-Aid solution, I guess, in the midst of it, saying, and I think that's where a lot of times we can get stuck is we don't know what the next step is. We just have a big vision in mind, but what are the steps to get there? And so what it led us to do is just rethink our very small space, and try to be creative. Our biggest issue, and you guys probably relate to this, was kid space. We actually, in the midst of having multiple services and everything, our bottleneck was more of our kid space than our sanctuary. And it took a lot of people looking at it to understand that, because a lot of our natural tendency, especially I think, depending on what your role is, but a lot of us just think of the sanctuary and how many people we can fit in there. Well, we understood and we recognized patterns that we studied and realized, well, we aren't the people we're trying to reach. They're not comfortable bringing their kids, even though we have an excellent kids program, because there's no space for them. And because of our lack of space, we weren't able to divide them out in a much healthier way. So you had age groups that were crammed in together, that, some could understand, a level of teaching that the others couldn't. And so we had to creatively do a Band-Aid solution to create more classrooms in our space, while also continuing thinking towards the future and planning on how we increase our space.
Yeah. So when we started the process, you had already purchased some land, secured some land, and then purchased that land where you can build a larger, more substantial facility on. But realizing that when you're at 100% or even 90% space filled for your kids, you've got to come up with a solution in between. So what really happened, and we're going to talk about vision next, and Nate's going to share. What really happened was, we want to see this greater vision to reach more people. We know we can't do it in this facility, but this is all we have for now. So this year we've got to figure out a way. So that's why, figure out a way to restructure the space. And it actually turned out better. Actually, the building felt bigger, even though we captured space for another kid's class. And so the flow actually turned out really well. And just so you know, so when we started this process with Lifestone Church with Ben, I invited Nate to come and be part of the Intentional Churches process as well. He was not on staff with them then, but through this process ended up coming on staff with Lifestone Church. And so he's going to kind of share about vision. And this is, vision about even for Lifestone, how to reach the next 1%, how to reach the 1% of their part of the valley. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks,
Oh,
Dave.
we didn't go through our questions. Ben, I'm going to let you read through these questions, things that we should be asking. I'm sorry, I messed that up.
Right.
All right, here we go.
Okay, super quick. Okay, do we have an agreed upon set of vision matrix? So important. Our main matrix are baptisms and discipleship engagement. And the reason we do that is because it filters out church hopping. And, if people are actually getting baptized, I don't think there's any perfect set of metrics. But when you're getting in a room and trying to bring your leaders together to make actual decisions to activate your plan, you guys know probably what this is like, that everybody has their own agenda and their own idea of what success is and what they want to see promoted, and when you can come together based on the Great Commission engine and go, wait, this is what we're called to do, and how do we measure it? And I think it is measured different by different churches, but you're trying to measure the impact of the Great Commission. But then that's going to actually make you, be on the same page and have clarity as far as activating your group to say, so in that example we gave, hey, we're going to make more space for kids because we're trying to reach this is our one, and they have kids, It's a big deal to them. And so we had to make that a big priority. And how often are we meeting? So through this whole process, we realized that we weren't in communication enough, so that we didn't have that clarity. We didn't have, people who were in positions to make decisions and lead things. We weren't all on the same team. So our staff meets once a week now, and our staff's kind of unique, I think, that we have lots of part-time people, very, very part-time, many of them. And so communication wasn't, I've been in other settings in larger churches where we're all in the office together all week, and communication, we're kind of on the same page more. But I think in Utah, especially, we'll deal with lots of volunteer leaders, and so that was important for us to meet once a week. I meet with my board once a month, which is more than what's kind of required in our bylaws. And then we started a thing where our top leaders will meet in huddles every Sunday morning, because we've realized through this process how important it is to communicate, the vision of why we're doing stuff, and leads to people actually following through. Who's responsible for what? Clarifying that is also important, and helps delegate out. How do we make decisions today while preparing for a new tomorrow? I think when you have a vision for what you're trying to do in the future, Dave, you mentioned, we looked at our area and how unreached it is, and throughout the vision of saying, well, how could we reach 1%? And then that makes the balls roll as far as what that looks like, but it makes you think, maybe there's other ways to reach people too. What does that mean for sending out people and helping other churches in the area and things like that? But knowing your future plan that you feel like God's given you helps you make the smaller decisions day to day, right? Because it's not just randomly going, well, what do we do today to address this crisis or to address these wants and needs of people that are pressuring us? No. We make those decisions based on, okay, this is where God wants us to be, and this is where we're headed, and this is the kind of influence we're going to make. So I think that's really important, and it frees people to actually not feel stuck in going, well, I'm just trying to put out fires left and right, or, but rather, no, I feel confident in making these decisions because I know it's in line with our bigger vision of what we're doing. And when do we get to celebrate? So I've been trying to implement this. Dave, you really influenced me on this. Every time we meet, we try to start out with, hey, what's awesome things that God has been doing? What do we celebrate? What's good? So in a small way, in that way, but then also based on the things that you, the matrix or metrics, I keep saying matrix. I think my son was bugging me to watch Matrix. I was like, no, you can't watch Matrix. The metrics that you implement, I think those are big reasons to celebrate. Like I said, for us, we look at baptisms because we feel like people, if new people are getting baptized, we specifically look at adult baptisms to really look at the health, and then discipleship engagement. So we celebrate new life groups starting, we celebrate baptisms in a big way because those are two of our big health indicators.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's really good, Ben. And, when we're coaching church, I always start when I come back, because when I end a coaching session with a church leadership team, we're ending with, these are the actions we're going for. These are the things we're going to work on, right? So let's go to work. And then when you come back to celebration, when I come back and start off with celebration, I am always amazed. And I'm serious, like every time I go to a church and I know that they've been putting those actions into place, I come back and I say celebrations. We can fill an entire chart with celebrations. And man, that just fires up the team. They're like, yes, we chose to go this way to fulfill the Great Commission, and this is happening, and it's actually working. And so then those celebrations just pour fuel. They pour fuel on future work, because you're saying, yes, we have seen God do these things. And so, all right, I'm going to Nate with vision. I already set you up, so here you go.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, just to kind of set a stage for you guys, I was able to be a part of Centerpoint Church from 2009 to 2018. And we started with a vision of reaching the people of Utah County. And our vision statement was good, but it was probably lacking some detail to it. And our vision statement over there was, we want to be a church that goes. We want to go from a church that is impossible to find to a church that cannot be missed. And so what that included was moving from a neighborhood building that nobody could find in Orem to finding a spot down on I-15 freeway, right off of off the busiest interchange in all of Utah, which is I-15 and University Parkway in Orem. So it's the number one interchange. And so we were just off of that, and we bought property there, and it took us 10 years to accomplish that vision. What I love about vision is that vision is simply this idea that we're all in the same mission. Everybody who church plants is in the same mission. If your mission is anything but the Great Commission, then you're probably not on mission with Jesus. It's just, we can all just agree that the Great Commission is our mission, but the vision is what kind of fine tunes everything and says, this is how we are going to accomplish the Great Commission in our particular area. And so, at Lifestone, now that I've come on board, we're a church of 270, wanting to become a church in 5 years of over 1,000 people. Well, how do we do that? Well, there's some macro things that we work on. That's like, we've got to move into a new space. There's property that's been purchased. We've gone through a charrette to design a new building. And so those macro ways are really top heavy, leadership heavy decisions. But then there's the micro level where we go, we need everybody within our church to have alignment with what we're doing and where we're going. And then we also need to have everybody, as they find alignment, go, I'm going to be active in this. Like, not only do I agree with the vision, but I want to be a person who is actively engaging lost people, because we've identified our one. I want to actively engage lost people. I want to be a person who invites them, a person who can effectively share with them the good news. And this is the micro boots on the ground that are going to make all of those people throughout Harriman and Riverton start coming as we prepare the soil for the macro level. And it takes both of those things to accomplish a 5-year vision. Over the long haul, I feel like, even within this year, Ben and I have met several times going, our vision isn't tracking the way we would like it to. So how do we reanalyze the macro? We're going to keep working through sermon series, through our life groups, through different equipping opportunities that we're going to offer. We're going to keep working on the micro level of developing a people who are in alignment, people who love the Great Commission, which is, we take for granted this idea as church planners and pastors that everybody's on board with the Great Commission. There are lots of people who read the Great Commission and go, well, that's just for the disciples. And they go, but that us who come to church every week, well, church is about us. The 99 kind of are stubborn. A lot of people like to just be about the 99, and they don't self-identify as Great Commission people. And so we're working to till the soil for people to say, yes, I do identify as a Great Commission person, that Jesus has called me to this in the sphere that he's given me. And then on the macro level, we're making bigger and bigger plans and trying to identify how do we make that next step. And Dave's really helped us with this and in saying, well, what are you going to do to reach your next 100 people? And so our leadership team is like racking our brains, because we're going, okay, we want to make that next step of reaching the next 100 people without burning out everybody. We've got a phenomenal volunteer base. We've got an incredible kids ministry base, a welcome team, a communication team, a staff team that's doing everything like Ben had mentioned, kind of on a part-time level, but doing part-time level, but doing full-time level work almost. And everybody, you know, it's a very, I would say sensitive or fragile ground, because if you push that too hard and people get burned out, then you got nothing. And so we're analyzing those things, and then now we've got this pandemic. So
Yeah.
we retool. You know, we're trying to find new ways and how we can reach people through different mediums, and that probably goes more into what we're doing with operations.
Yeah.
But
Well, then, Nate, what questions should our churches be asking then about vision?
okay,
More clear, because we talk about having a really clear and compelling vision, but then also holding your vision loosely. We talk about that a lot in intentional churches. Hold your vision loosely and refresh it often. And man, that really has helped with our churches, because I mean, holding it loosely is like, well, we can't meet together now. You know, we gotta adjust, right? And refresh it often, as we might have to refresh it for just this season, right? Think differently for the season. So why don't you walk through the questions that churches should be asking about vision?
well, who are we positioned to reach for Christ? I think the no-brainer here in Utah is always, well, we're trying to reach people who are coming out of the LDS church. But one of the unique things that we found at Lifestone is we also have a bunch of former Catholics that are coming. And so one of the ways that we boiled this down is we're reaching people who are out of overly religious backgrounds. So our catchphrase is Jesus without religion. It doesn't matter if you came from this particular religious background or that one. We want to reach you with the true beauty of the grace of God, the purity of the gospel, rather than man-made religion. And so I think our scope and our one is probably tailored towards that person, but that comes out of the LDS background. But it's also uniquely tailored for anybody who comes out of a religious background that's seeking Jesus. Ben, would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah. And I think without asking this question, you will naturally just drift towards reaching other believers.
Yeah.
And not really having a kingdom impactor.
Well, that's where having a clear-eyed focus on who your one is and going after that is so important. Number two, where is God leading us in the next 3 to 5 years? You know, and I think that's a lot of that has to do with the flexibility that we need to have within the vision of going, okay, well, we ran down this street and it's not working. I mean, we dealt with that at Centerpoint. There was a lot of decisions we made that were just dead ends, and we had to retool. Our 5-year vision became more of an 8 to 9 year vision, but in the end, they accomplished it. I mean, it's a church well over 1,000 people and pretty strong, and it's going to be fun to be a part of that as we grow with Lifestone. I get to do the same thing again of just being along for the ride and helping Ben figure this part out. So I'm excited about that. What would it look like to double our kingdom impact? You know, these are really stretching questions. I think, you know, when it comes to vision, you're gonna get stretched. You're gonna be a piece of taffy. You gotta just accept that, and realize that some of the things that God's calling you to do aren't always easy. And so I think when you look at doubling your kingdom impact, not only is that exciting, but it's a very stretching thing. The next question is, how will we know if we are making more and better disciples? And that goes back to metrics. I think it's really you got to keep tooling, keep working through the Great Commission engine. How many people are coming from landing in a Sunday service to getting involved in a life group? How many of those people are we really seeing come from a life group and then becoming, sacrificed living believers? I forget the exact terminology, but the kind of believers who are giving and serving and embodying the mission and vision of Jesus. And so those metrics, I think, are important, and every church's metrics are going to be similar, but going to be unique to them. Is the vision clear, compelling, and shared by all? And this is huge. I mean, I think vision's one thing, but what the operating system allows is it allows you to create a strategy that everybody can align themselves to. It's often said that leaders talk a lot about vision, but it's the strategy that brings alignment and buy-in. And I think that's the most compelling thing to me about intentional churches, is creating alignment and buy-in with your entire team. And you can't do that by just speaking out vision. You have to have step-by-step strategy that people can hang on to, and that they have a word in, they have a say in. And even if they don't get their way within the strategy, even if it's something that they didn't, that they said, well, we need to go do a bus ministry for Sunday school. And you go, that's not what we're doing. At least they got to kind of speak it. And as a tribe, you guys come together, as a leadership team, you come together and you kind of say, these are the most important things that we're going to do. These are our VIPs, and then you get buy-in and alignment from everybody from that. And that's an unbelievably powerful thing. Last is, how will we measure our vision? And, that's a great question, especially when you're talking about the flexibility of a vision. I think you just kind of always are going, how do we keep our eye on the ball? Even if a 5-year vision turns into a 6 or 7-year vision, keep your eye on the ball of what you feel God has called you as a church to accomplish, and be willing to do the things that he's asking you to do it.
Yep. All right, Nate, I'm just gonna go on to the next set of questions and have you walk us through those as well, about operations.
Okay.
So when we're talking about operations, just walk us through these questions and give us a little insight.
Sure. Are our systems the right size for today and tomorrow? I think for us at Lifestone, it's we're always holding this idea of like the systems and then the people in those systems, and we want to do these things in healthy ways. If we're going to accomplish something great, how do we do that without burning people out? And so I think those are important pieces as you try to systemize and think about what you're doing right now versus what you're doing tomorrow. That you hold that piece, because you'll never accomplish your vision with a bunch of burned out people. And I don't know if that's what you were wanting with this question, but that's where I'm going with it. What is holding us back or creating chaos? Always important to eliminate, or to evaluate, I should say. The things that are in the way, the roadblocks, the things that are unclear. I think those 4 helpful lists that we go through are really good at weeding this stuff out. What's working, what's not working, what's missing, what's confused. Helps you get to the bottom of really the things that are holding you back. What new systems do we need to implement? And this is always a part of, like, if there's something that's not working, how do we cut the dead weight and be willing to do something that really will work to accomplish our vision? And so it's always asking these analytical questions. And I think I've said this before in one of our previous webinars, I think this is what makes ministry fun. I think this is what makes staff meetings fun, is that you're constantly looking at how you can get better. There's nothing worse than being a part of a leadership team and nobody wants to talk about how we can get better. And everybody gets stuck in a rut. And maybe there's 1 or 2 people who are willing to get better or wanting to get better, and then but nobody's talking about this as a team. That can be a really frustrating piece that gets in the way of vision, I believe. Last one is have we documented our routines to create efficiency and scalability for growth? I think this is good, to be aware of this documentation, and knowing that you have the right people to put these things down so you can analyze the metrics. I for one am not the administrative type, and Ben is a true church planter, and we got to have people who are systems people who are working behind the scenes more to get this kind of data and to create these kind of metrics so we know how to be efficient in the scale. So I'm thankful that we have a team that does that. That I'm not really a part of that, and I'm thankful that Ben doesn't have to hold that in his hands either. So this to me is all about creating a team around you of people who have different gifts and skills and abilities than what you have.
Yeah. And as you're talking about that, I think about your team, and this really does empower as well. It empowers the people who are behind the scenes and, who might be more of the systems people. They're like, I can see why I'm a big part of this, right? Because I'm creating systems that help carry out the vision moving forward. Okay, so we're going to move on. Ben's going to share a little bit about leaders and a couple stories about what wasn't working, what is working. So why don't you start with that, Ben?
Okay.
You're on mute. Unmute. I'm going to unmute you. I just.
Am I unmuted? Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Which leaders am I mentioning?
Well, when we first started with the coaching with you guys, you had a class for ex-Mormons, and maybe share a little bit about how that was not quite working and how it was actually distracting from your mission to reach your one.
Oh yeah. Well, as a part of this, and I don't want to. I hope this can be encouraging and kind of discouraging as you clarify this vision and where God wants you to go, and being focused on accomplishing the people that you feel like God wants you to reach, and all these things. It, I think, can highlight people who, like Nate was saying, don't have a heart for the Great Commission. And what you want to do is try to lead them onto that vision, and use scripture and point to what we're called to do. But it can lead to people understanding that maybe God's not even calling them to be a part of what you're doing. Maybe they have some other calling, and it can actually help you become more healthy by some leaders recognizing that they've got a different heart, they've got a different direction that they want to go. And instead of kind of fighting other people in your church for what you feel like God wants you to do, they see this clarity and they go, okay, well, we need to move on even. And that's really hard and painful, but it can be one of the healthiest things that can ever happen in your church. And we've seen that, while we've reached a lot of new people, we've seen some people come to a realization that, they aren't on board with the vision, and it's been a really good thing. So that's happened in our leadership development somewhat, that we've had people come in with their ideas and their ministries and programs that they want to promote. And as we try to get in alignment and have clarity on where we're heading and how we feel God's leading us to get there, it releases them. Do you guys have people in your church that you feel need that permission to be released? You do. Okay. And
let go.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then it highlights areas that you need leadership, and I feel like that is such a big part of this whole process. And these 6 things is recognizing, um, uh, you know, your what things obviously you need to expand on your leadership. And a part of that process led us to bringing Nate on board, actually, as we had a bigger vision of like, okay, well, this is what God wants us to do, which was developed not just from me, really. The vision that we came up with, and I thought this was interesting, came from people in our church, not even our staff. It was people who were a part of the process, high-level leaders in our church. But I'm almost embarrassed to say this, their vision was much bigger than mine. and then that even gave me the confidence to go, okay, well, this isn't, my own personal agenda of trying to, want something because I'm the pastor of this church or something, but it came from the roots of our people. So that really helped develop leadership, actually, within. If they developed the vision along with us, they had to take ownership of it more as well. But that bigger vision led us to go, okay, then what does this mean leadership wise for us? What, reaching the next 100 people and reaching and having a greater impact in not just numbers, but a greater impact in reaching the people that we're trying to reach, our one. And then how do we make sure that we're discipling them in a healthy way? And all those things led to going, okay, well, what are the leadership needs? How do we develop leaders? How do we even pray for other leaders that we obviously need to see this, grow and come about?
Yeah. Hey, Ben, I remember that moment in our coaching time when we were saying, what is God calling us to do, at Lifestone? What is God calling us to do? How many people to reach? And I remember one of your board members just like not agreeing with the small number. Like, no, I think it's 1%. We should reach 1%. What would it? And then that 1% number was like, what are we going to do? How could we reach 1% of our corner of the southwest corner of the valley? And it really just, I remember it just bringing energy to the room and energy to the team, and it's really a goal that seems almost impossible, and it is going to be impossible without God's help. So why don't you walk us through the questions that churches should be asking about their leadership team?
Do we have the right people, and are they in the right roles for both today and tomorrow? And I'm convinced, after being on staff at lots of churches, planting 2 churches, that you have to build leadership, and maybe that may be staff as well, ahead of the vision God has for you, if that makes sense. That you can't, you're not going to catch up, really. That's usually not how it goes. That you need that leadership to help, that God wants to use to get you to the next step. And so it's really hard to get other people sometimes to see that you need to develop leaders, implement new volunteer roles, or even hire staff when they think, well, no, we don't need to do that until we get to further down the road. We don't need that. Well, if they have a bigger vision, they understand where we're going. And so it clarifies the leadership needs within your church. So this all kind of, I think, runs together. And then it helps clarify the people that you do have. Like, maybe they're spending lots of time and energy and effort on things that don't really line up with really accomplishing the Great Commission in the way that you feel like God's called you to do it. So it helps clarify the people that you do have and take all their energy and effort in the right direction. It helps you, because I talk to pastors all the time, that like, how do I convince my church that we need to hire this next person or invest in this next leader? And that vision can help lead to that. What kind of team culture will govern our actions? this was a big reason we brought Nate on board. Is we wanted to identify that before we set out on this big journey that we felt like God was leading us to do in the kind of a new chapter in our church's history, and we wanted to determine that from the very start. And part of it's learning. Why learn things the hard way in our own experiences if God has blessed us with giving us pictures of other people learning the hard way. I think we get a lot of that, right, all through the Bible. And so we'd seen and learned from other people and our own experiences in church, and wanted to set that and establish what our culture was going to be. And we focus heavily on a team culture, that we, it's not some top-down thing, but that we collaborate a lot, we communicate a lot. What is our plan for developing leaders, both for today's needs and tomorrow's challenges? And this all just goes in line, I think, with that clarified vision of going, okay, well, how many more, as we one of our big things that we measure is discipleship engagement. Well, to reach this next group of people, or if we're going to have this kind of influence reaching people, that means we need more people leading small group discipleship, thing. We call them life groups at our church. And so so it gives us a plan, and it leads us to go, okay, well, how are we going to develop those leaders? And instead of just I think often there is no plan, there is no process. It's just kind of who we have, and we never have enough is our feeling, rather than saying, okay, here's a process. And so for real quick, small example, in our life groups, every season we say, develop another leader, look for that next, person within your group. And it all has to do with this whole process of understanding that we're looking forward and thinking about the leadership that needs to be developed moving forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And finally, number 6, domain. I'm going to just turn it over to Mike Packer to share for a few minutes.
Yeah, just the actions. And I would just say this is that our VIP actions were very building centric, really trying to turn the building into a community center. And what we've done over the last couple months is that we've actually had to just hit pause on it because of that. Now, thankfully, we were already kind of diving into the digital presence. Like, that was one of our VIPs also. So we came up with these few of them. And this VIP it really gave us a head start on where a lot of churches were just a couple months ago in getting online. Like, our feet were already in the water. And so it was helpful that we had already identified that ahead of time. But then the other thing about this is that in the crisis with the Great Commission engine, now it gave us time to pause and then, okay, what are we doing for worship? What are we doing for reaching our one? What are we doing for our simple steps? And so it really just gave us a template to be able to fit into, or to look at as we're making decisions. And so that's the big thing about the VIP questions, the action. And the questions are, what must we act on today? What can our teams be doing right now? And what do we need to be doing together? And what will release the impact of our church in the next season? And what do we need to be scouting for that's coming next? And I would say that just the whole Great Commission engine, having a plan in place, allows you to hit pause on that, but then able to go back to your template to be able to see, okay, what are we doing for community groups right now? What are we doing? How are we enabling, the congregation to be able to live on mission? So
Good.
That's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And that's really good. It does give you, each of these tools kind of helps you be able to, shift when you need to shift, right? And to, no one expected this pandemic, but now that it's here, How is that going to affect us? And eventually we'll get back to normal again, but normal might look a little different. So as we wrap up here, I just want you guys to know that we're going to be doing some online workshops for your team. So most of you that are tuning into these webinars, your pastors or your leaders, church planters. And so we want to do this with your team, because really what Intentional Churches is, a lot of books, pastors just read the book and pastors get inspired by the book and pastors do the book and then nobody else follows along. This is really created for team leadership. And so we want to do some, we were planning to do some live workshops, but I don't think that's going to happen. And so we're going to try to do some online workshops. So if you'd be interested in bringing your team on a Zoom call, just fire me an email and let me know you're interested. We're going to have to do a few churches at a time. So it's become first come, first serve. So just fire me an email and let me know, hey, I'd be interested in bringing our team. And then we'll set some dates up for this summer to do that. And then there's a Great Commission activation quiz that's on our Loving Utah website. So now that you kind of have been learning this language, you'll be able to fill this out, and you can have your team fill it out. So you can just download it. It's not an online, you can't do it online, but you can pull it up and you can print it off or you can send it. This is a really good way to kind of answer some questions and to see, like, where are you as you're carrying out the Great Commission. And then if you haven't got your Intentional Churches book, I have free books to give away. So I'd be happy to send you one. Just go to lovingutah.org, click on the free book link, and I just need your name and address, and I'll send one out as quick as I can. So thank you for everyone for being here today. Thank you, Mike and Ben and Nate, for your insights and for just really leading the way as you are leading Intentional Churches, and we want to help churches in Utah move from surviving to thriving to multiplying. And I just believe this is a great tool and a great process. And as we're learning together, I think we can influence more and more churches to create plans that will double their kingdom impact. So thank you for being here. It's time to go. And so it's nice to see everybody here live. And if you're on our recording, we're glad that you tuned in as well. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.